All right, welcome back. We are game 3004 in the winter 2021 semester, and it's week 4, part 1 of our broadcast. And today we're sitting at this place right here. We're doing a lab. Notice that next week we're hitting agents, AI agents, nav meshes. And as we're moving towards our mid-semester checkpoint, which is going to happen on week 7, that is the next presentation you'll be doing, and I'll be kind of supplying you with the details of what I'm looking for very shortly on this one. But for last week, what we did was we did a lab 1. It was not for marks, and again, welcome for everyone who's coming in right now. It wasn't for marks. It was more like to get your feet wet into the process. We started talking about Blender. A little bit. I introduced Blender to you guys. For some people who've used, again, Blender in the past, I think it's been something that's been pretty good for you. At the same time, it's weird. I'm seeing a weird shadow on my live production. Not sure how that is looking right now. At the same time, what's happening is that we learned about how to bring Blender into Unity, so that was really, really good. So we discussed that, and we created a custom first-person perspective camera controller, and that's really what that was all about. So that was pretty good. Okay, so that was what we did last week. We also created a small death plane, so when the character falls off the world, it kind of shows us, that he can kind of teleport back to the respawn point. All right, so that's what we did last week. And what we're doing this week is we're doing lab 2. And lab 2 is going to be something that we're working with. It's going to be a little bit more detailed. Lab 2 is going to have, we're going to talk about materials in Blender. We're going to be talking about things like UV mapping, what that is, and how to make it work in Blender. I'm going to ask you guys to download a set of textures from textures.com. You can sign up for that, as well as how to texture 3D objects in Blender, how that works. We're going to be talking about shader nodes, starting off today, a little bit in Blender, and as well as how to deploy, change our platform to WebGL from a deployment perspective, and how to deploy to GitHub pages. So that's kind of where we're at in the core work of part 1. That's the part 1 lab. That's the part that I'm going to get you guys to do. Part 2, where it says additions, I'm probably going to make a second video. So after class is done, after lab is done, I'll make a second video that'll talk about a few things that I wanted to talk about. One, we've talked about before, a mini map. So this will be like kind of an async section. We'll be talking about post-processing effects and color grading, as well as an inventory system. All right, so all that kind of stuff is what we're going to be talking about today. All right. So again, moving forward, what about what's due? I've released the second playable today. That's what I've kind of come up with. And the second playable is something that is due week 6. I'm going to post the details about the second playable very shortly. Actually, they're already posted. I'm going to talk about them very shortly. And the first playable release, just a reminder, is due this Sunday at midnight. So if you haven't had a chance to work on this with your team, you need to get cracking on this so that way you can get working on this for Sunday. Again, please read the details. I kind of talked about the details about the first playable release in another week, last week. Your other items that are due are your third weekly report is due this week. Wait. Yes. And your first peer review is also due this week. So if you haven't had a chance to do either one of these, I recommend you get to it. They're both worth 1% of your final grade. So please don't forget to do it. Yes, so your weekly report's due tonight. Your first peer review is due on Sunday. So some people have already worked on this and they've sent it in. Please make sure you complete the document. Don't leave blanks. It doesn't make sense for you to leave blanks. And then your fourth weekly report is going to be due next week, and we're going to continue with these as we go forward. The next peer review, your second peer review, will be in line with your second playable release. Okay, that's how it goes. Can't see the peer review on Blackboard. Okay, let's switch to that. So if you go to Blackboard, then if you look at first peer review, it's right here inside of week 4. So if you go to week 4, you're going to see first peer review. So please make sure you take care of that. It's individual. So again, one thing to note is that peer reviews and things around your weekly report and so on, they're all individual. Okay, so that's important. All right. Okay, so that is what's due, and I wanted to talk about that first. Before we get into anything else, this part here, this first part, I want to talk about the project part 5, the second playable release. And again, when we get together for lecture, I'll be talking about theory as well as anything that's due. So this thing is due week 6. That's Sunday, February 21st at midnight. What I'm asking you to do here is, at least in this one, you should have 50% of your level graphic assets and sound created and deployed. All right, so that's important for you guys to do. Make sure you have that. Character, of course, is controllable. Enemies would be fully functional in 2 weeks. And what I mean by that is their sensing and their pathfinding should be ready to go in a couple weeks. And we'll talk about pathfinding and AI next week. You'll also create your third official iteration of your game design document, and you'll be continuing to improve that. Common requirements that you'll have in your screen. Your load option won't work, but what I'm asking you to do is make sure that you can adjust in your option screen. You should have the audio options that are working. You should be able to raise and lower volume. Second playable. Your first playable is this Sunday, Flavio. I'm talking about second playable, which is due 2 weeks from Sunday. So a couple weeks out, week 6, we're talking about. So lots of time for that. Okay, so your gameplay screen, you're going to have at least 50% of your enemies should be fully functional. So if you have multiple enemy types, then this PDF is for the first playable. I gave you the wrong one. This should say second playable release. Did I give you this one? Or, oh, okay, that's right. Okay, so so as we go forward, you can also see that so your game over screen, again, what it should show you is if you won, if that is a condition that you can do in your game, you should definitely show that. There will be an inventory system for the next release, but I only expect you to be able to run over items that you come across on the floor, and they'll pick up into your inventory. You can pull up your inventory and show it, but I don't expect you to be, as an example, to be able to drag and drop items. That is not something that there's no expectation there from a drag and dropping perspective at all. Okay. So you also must have a health system, but this feature does not need to function for this release. Okay, so I know it sounds like easy to do a health system, but I'm going to be talking about a health system slowly, and I want to make sure that we're in line with making sure everything is up to snuff. So this next release, the second playable, I won't need it, right? I'll need it definitely for your checkpoints. So this is something that we're going to add in to the checkpoint and further, but not for this release. Your game must include a mini map, and that definitely should be something that works. You can make it so that it's mostly functional, but you may want to add additional tweaks later. So you'll have a mini map that's working. I'll be talking about most likely a mini map later on today in the second video I make for the lab. And you already know how to do one because we talked about a mini map last semester in detail, and it's kind of the same idea. Your game should have sound effects, and at least 50% of all your sound effects should be available, to provide feedback, including menu selections, pickups, damage sounds, weapon sounds, all that stuff. And your game soundtrack, which is music, should work for your start screen, your gameplay screen, and your game over screen, but no dynamic sounds are required at this time. So this is all, again, not for this release coming up on Sunday, but for the following release I'm talking about now, okay? And then there are game-specific requirements. Please make sure you read these with your producers and your team. Example, for 3D platforms, at least 2 types of platforms now would have to be available, not just the static platform, but maybe another one. Okay, of course, your death plane should be there. And when you characterize, you're going to go to the nearest checkpoint now, not just one single spawn point. You guys know how to do this from last semester. Hazards, you should have at least 1 hazard functional by the second playable release, as well as the goal asset should take the player to the game over screen and basically show that they won or completed the level successfully. So then there's more for asymmetric tower defense, which I'd like you to read again for your producers. You and your producers should read through this. Your sandbox crafting survival game, again, there's different details here that you can read. And the rest, third draft of your GDD, release demo video, and your version control and project management are all pretty much the same. They're status quo, where you're going to have to generate your third version of your game design document, a working link to your GitHub repo, and a working link to your demo video. One thing that's going to change for your mid-semester checkpoint, which is going to take the place of your midterm exam, is you're going to have to put your game up live on the internet, right? Because remember, in this first half, you're creating a WebGL platform, and we're going to talk about how to do that today. So to give you practice on how to get it done and start going with it even earlier, even though it's not due for your second playable release, I'm going to make it so that you are practicing it over several weeks so that you know what to do. And again, the breakdown is as follows. So that is the details for your second playable release, which can be found in, if you look up on Blackboard again, and if you look at assignments, then you can see down that there are 2 releases that we're talking about. One of them is due this Sunday. So this release here is due Sunday, February 7th. That's this Sunday at midnight. And the one I was just talking about is due Sunday, February 21st. So that's 2 weeks out from Sunday, again at midnight. So please make sure that these 2 releases, they're both worth 5%. If you notice, each of these things have been worth 5% so far. After this release, your second playable release, the releases become more weighty in terms of how much they matter from your final mark perspective. But there's several here. These are all this is all group work, and the individual work, of course, is going to be your peer reviews, your weekly reports, and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to get heavier as we go. So for people who have submitted everything, anything you've submitted has been marked. So please take a look there to make sure that you're getting credit where credit is due. So Michael says, so we are not going to make this into a mobile game by the end. It will be. Starting the second half of semester, we're going to switch to mobile. I'm just getting you to prototype, Michael, in WebGL, so that way you can have freedom of getting things going, making your screen work properly, all that kind of stuff, lighting so you can see it much bigger, on the screen and those kind of things. And then when we move to mobile, there will be a switch over of control schemes. Some of your quality settings will have to be switched and so on, and adjustments and those kind of things. But I want you to worry right now about creating a prototype in WebGL. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Eventually, for your final product, theoretically, you should have 2 platforms you can build for. One is WebGL. So if you want to show your game off, to other people outside of your little mobile game, that's great. At the same time, it should work for mobile, which is the goal for the end of semester. Okay, so that is the details that I want you to know about for your second playable release. I'm going to stop the video now, and I'm going to make a new one for the next piece, which is going to be talking about materials and all those kind of things. All right.